In a luxurious glass tower in Austin, Texas, where the elite in tailored suits signed contracts worth hundreds of millions, a thin man quietly bent down to mop the floor. His faded blue uniform, the old metal bucket, and the calloused hands made him invisible in this world of power. But his silence was only a shell, because in a single moment, the game of power flipped. A sarcastic remark from a millionaire CEO cut through the air like a blade. If you can translate this, my salary is yours. From that mocking challenge, a shocking truth was revealed. The supposedly flawless international contract concealed a $37 million trap. And the invisible janitor was the one who saw through it. His name was Gabriel Alvarez. By day, a night shift janitor scorned by everyone. But behind that facade was a secret that once made the skies of the U.S. military remember his name. Midnight Viper, a call sign that could make an entire squadron of F-22s stand at attention the moment it echoed through the radio. In the towering glass building at the heart of Austin, Texas, the summer night still blazed with light from office floors that never slept. Inside, polished suits discussed contracts worth hundreds of millions, wine glasses shimmered under golden lamps, and laughter laced with ambition echoed down the marble halls. But at the ground floor, worlds apart from that power and prestige, a man was hunched over, his rough hands gripping the mop handle, patiently wiping away each streak of dust and dried coffee stain from the marble floor. His name was Gabriel Alvarez, 34 years old. To everyone in that building, he was nothing more than the night janitor, unseen, unnecessary, a small cog in the vast machinery of Beaumont Dynamics, a tech empire. People only noticed him when the floor was still wet or the trash overflowed. But inside the faded chest pocket of his uniform, he carried something more valuable than anything else in the world. A crumpled paper crane with a child's scrawled handwriting in pencil. Daddy is my hero. Maya, 7 years old, was Gabe's entire world. Her gap-toothed smile, her small face, her dark eyes gleaming like a Texas lake at dawn. She was sleeping now in their cramped apartment in the city's south side, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, waiting for her father to take her to school in the morning. For Gabe, every drop of sweat that fell on the polished marble floor was a promise to her. He might be invisible to the world, but in Maya's eyes, he was still a hero. When the elevator light flicked on, a group of executives stepped out. Leading them was Charlotte Beaumont, 37, CEO of the company. Wavy brown hair, sharp blue eyes, a commanding elegance etched into every step she took. She glanced at Gabe only for half a second, long enough to mark the line between the world she ruled and the one he was trapped in. Her assistant smirked. "Watch out, man, or you'll ruin my boss's Gucci shoes." Gabe said nothing. He merely stepped aside, pushed his bucket away, and kept mopping as if he hadn't heard a word. But his hand tightened, brushing the paper crane in his pocket. The feel of its rough folds reminded him why he stood firm, why he endured, why he stayed silent. And that silence, so calm, so unmoved, made Charlotte glance back for an instant. For a moment she hesitated, then masked it with a faint, cynical smile. They had no idea that the gaunt man with the mop once bore a name that made even the U.S. Air Force bow its head: Midnight Viper. He had once sat in the cockpit of a fighter jet, slicing through the night sky, the engine's roar like a blade tearing heaven apart. He had commanded secret missions, saved comrades from death by mere seconds. His call sign once made an entire F-22 squadron stand to attention, a wordless salute to the hero in the shadows. But that was 3 years ago, when his wife Rebecca succumbed to illness. That day, Gabe hung up his uniform, turned away from the sky, and accepted a single mission: to be a father. He gave up medals, rank, and glory for a life everyone else called ordinary, a night shift janitor with a meager wage and a tiny apartment. Yet within that ordinariness, he found something sacred. Every minute beside Maya, night in Austin was still alive. Neon lights flickered on Town Lake. Country music drifted down the streets. At a roadside diner, workers laughed after their shifts while Gabe silently pushed his mop cart past, unnoticed. He didn't need them to see him. He just needed to keep his daughter smiling. But fate has a cruel sense of humor for those who try to stay hidden. In a matter of days, an event, seemingly trivial, would strip away his disguise and drag him back into the heart of power. Not in the skies of fighter jets this time, but inside a boardroom blazing with fluorescent light. And it would begin with one arrogant remark from Charlotte Beaumont and an international contract that only the invisible man could truly read. That night, when the building was empty, Gabe stood alone in the grand lobby. Golden light glinted off the glass walls, reflecting his thin silhouette. He looked at himself, a shadow trembling amid a world of privilege. Then his hand clenched around the paper crane again. His eyes lit with a fire that belonged to another life, the same fire that once shook the midnight skies. He never said it aloud, but Maya was the reason Midnight Viper still lived. And when fate began to turn its wheel, the world would soon learn. The man everyone ignored in this building was the one who could decide its future. Gabe rarely liked to recall the past, but sometimes the reflection on glass brought it back. 3 years ago, he wasn't the man mopping floors. He was in the cockpit of an F-18 Hornet, the radar glowing against the black night, a comrade's voice crackling through the headset. Midnight Viper, lead the way. He had flown through storms charged with lightning, dodged missiles that passed within a heartbeat. In those moments, he knew he was born to be the wings of his nation. Then Rebecca fell ill. For the first time, he saw her fragile, her blue eyes dimming under hospital lights. The doctors spoke in numbers and charts, but Gabe could only think of Maya. Barely 4, too young to grasp what death meant. He had stood there, torn between the sky and home, and he chose home. Rebecca passed 6 months later, leaving him alone with their daughter. The city of Austin didn't care for heroes who'd hung up their wings. It only worshipped those who could sign deals, raise profits, inflate stock charts. So Gabe folded his uniform neatly, locked it away, and took any job that gave him time with Maya. The night shift janitor role fit that. Little pay, long hours, but it ended early enough for breakfast duty and hair combing before school. On winter mornings, he often sat with Maya in a small cafe. His cup of hot black coffee steamed between his hands while she sipped warm milk and folded paper cranes from napkins. "Daddy, I did it!" She'd grin, showing him a crooked little crane with uneven wings. Gabe would take it gently, as if it were treasure. To him, it wasn't just paper. It was proof that the world still gave him a reason to stand. Inside the Beaumont Dynamics Tower, contrast was everywhere. Young executives parked their Teslas in the golden-lit garage while Gabe quietly emptied bins filled with crumpled drafts, half-finished contracts, and leftover takeout. He would glance at the papers before tossing them. Contracts, figures, notes scrawled in Japanese or German. His eyes, once trained on classified military intel, were still sharp. He could spot mistranslations, legal traps, linguistic slights instantly. Yet he said nothing, just balled up the papers and threw them away. It wasn't his business, but that habit, the instinct to see what others missed, would soon make it impossible for him to stay invisible. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Maya had asked, "Daddy, why don't you wear your uniform anymore?" Gabe had paused, watching her draw in the sunset light. He wanted to tell her about the sky, about the roaring clouds and the friends who never came back. But instead he smiled and brushed her hair. "Because now I wear a different kind of uniform. I'm your armor, Maya." She didn't fully understand, but she giggled, folding another paper crane. In Austin, no one cared about invisible janitors like Gabe, but within days, that invisibility would become the key. Because a deal with Japan's Nakamura Systems, a contract seemingly flawless, hit a $37 million trap. Executives, lawyers, financiers would all miss it. But the man who once read secret mission codes and saved lives through microscopic details, he wouldn't. That night, as he pushed his mop through the gleaming lobby and looked up at the bright floors above, Gabe had no idea fate had already set its cruel joke in motion. A proud CEO would toss out a taunting remark, and from that, everything would change. The invisible janitor would step into the light, not to seek glory, but to protect what he loved most, Maya, and a belief that even at the lowest rung of society, integrity could still rewrite the game. Late afternoon on the 42nd floor of Beaumont. Dynamics. The Austin sky burned crimson, the sunset painting streaks of fire across the glass walls. Below, the city stretched out like a living map, highways buzzing with cars, neon signs beginning to blink, the endless pulse of urban life. But inside the luxurious conference room, no one spared a glance for the beauty outside. Every pair, of eyes was locked on the thick folder resting on the walnut table, embossed with the sleek round logo of Nakamura Systems, a Japanese tech conglomerate. Charlotte Beaumont sat at the head of the table, the embodiment of modern power. Her charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, a thin silver necklace rested against her collarbone, and her blue eyes carried the cold precision of someone used to commanding a room. At just 36, she was already one of America's youngest female CEOs, worth hundreds of millions. The financial press hailed her as the face of a new generation, a warrior queen of capitalism, wielding influence to rival the oldest corporate dynasties. Yet there was one thing Charlotte lacked: patience for incompetence. And today's meeting was testing it. Clause 12, she said, tapping her manicured finger against the document. Can anyone here read it? Her voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the air. One of the finance directors hesitated. We might need to wait for the official translation from Tokyo, ma'am. Charlotte let out a brittle laugh that echoed against the glass ceiling. The official translation? She repeated, her tone sharp as glass. We're discussing a contract worth tens of millions, and not one of you can understand the text right in front of you. This is the 42nd floor of Beaumont Dynamics, not a beginner's Japanese class. Silence. Some looked down. Others pressed their lips tight. None dared speak. They all knew Charlotte's style. Humiliation was her favorite tool of authority. Charlotte crossed her arms, leaned back in her chair, a smirk curling on her lips. Then, almost playfully, she said, If anyone here can translate this contract, I'll give them my entire annual salary. A half-joking, half-cutting remark, but enough to freeze the room. A few nervous chuckles escaped, brittle and forced. No one noticed the pair of eyes watching from beyond the frosted glass. Gabriel Gabe Alvarez, 39, single father, janitor. He was pushing a cleaning cart, mop, rags, and a faded bucket, his presence as familiar and invisible as the hum of the air conditioner. Every day he appeared when others were distracted or gone, gathering trash, polishing floors, restoring shine to their world. No one remembered his face, only the faint scent of disinfectant that lingered after him, but Charlotte's words struck him like a trigger. My salary. That echo hit his chest hard. Through the slightly open door, he glimpsed the file on the table, filled with Japanese characters. Instantly, muscle memory stirred. The language wasn't foreign to him. In the Air Force, especially in the intelligence pilot unit, he had learned to read and translate mission reports. A single glance told him something was wrong. A vague clause that could cost Beaumont Dynamics tens of millions. His hand tightened on the mop handle. His heart raced, but his face stayed calm. He shouldn't get involved. This wasn't his fight. Then, the paper crane in his pocket brushed against his chest. Maya's little note whispering in his mind, Daddy is my hero. Gabe drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. Every head turned. A few executives frowned in irritation. Charlotte's gaze sharpened. What are you doing here? For the first time in months, Gabe stood straight. His voice was low but steady. I can translate it, and I think you should listen. A burst of laughter erupted, dry, mocking. Oh, for God's sake, one man muttered. The janitor wants to play international lawyer now? Charlotte folded her arms, her eyes like blades. What did you just say? I said this contract has a trap, Gabe replied, his gaze never leaving the document. Clause 12. If left as it is, this company will lose everything. The room stilled. Only the faint hum of the air vents filled the silence. Charlotte gave a short, disbelieving laugh. She rose and walked toward him, her heels clicking sharply. Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Then prove it. If you can actually translate it, my annual salary is yours. No one in that room could have predicted what happened next. Gabe's eyes changed. They were no longer the eyes of a weary janitor, but of a soldier, sharp, calm, and commanding. The same eyes that once made an F-22 squadron stand at attention when they heard his call sign. He took the document, his hands firm, eyes scanning the lines at lightning speed. Then he began to read aloud, fluent, smooth, precise. His voice didn't waver once. He didn't just translate. He explained every nuance of honorific phrasing, every layered implication, every word that could turn into a blade if misunderstood. Here, he pointed, this clause allows them to withdraw at any time under the pretext of cultural incompatibility. It sounds harmless, but in effect it means the company forfeits $37 million without the right to litigate. The laughter died. Sweat formed on foreheads. Executives exchanged stunned glances. Charlotte stood motionless, her expression wavering. For a fleeting second, she didn't see a janitor. She saw something else entirely. Someone sharp, dangerous, and utterly in control. Gabe set the contract back on the table, exhaled softly, and without another word, turned and pushed his cart out of the room. The conference room stayed silent. Charlotte gripped the edge of the table, her nails leaving white marks on the polished wood. The smug smile she always wore was gone. Outside, Gabe's footsteps echoed down the hall, steady, unhurried. But inside his chest, Maya's paper crane soared, its wings beating strong. He knew it then. He had just shattered his invisibility. From that moment, the world would never see him the same way again. And Charlotte, the woman who had thrown out that careless challenge, had unknowingly opened the door to the biggest secret of her life. When the conference room door closed, Charlotte Beaumont sat frozen. In her entire career, no one had ever stood up to her, let alone dismantled her power play so completely. And certainly not someone in a faded janitor's uniform holding a mop. But those eyes, the memory of them sent a chill through her. They weren't the eyes of a man who scrubbed floors. They carried the cold, hardened calm of someone who'd seen war, who understood the cost of life and death. The executives around the table said nothing. A few faces were pale, beads of sweat still glistening on their foreheads. They had all heard him, how he translated the contract flawlessly, as if Japanese were his native tongue, how he dissected every clause with razor-sharp precision. The high-paid financial experts and million-dollar lawyers were now as silent as schoolchildren caught cheating. Finally, one of them spoke up, voice trembling. "Charlotte, he's right. Clause 12, we just checked. It really does allow the partner to withdraw unconditionally." Charlotte said nothing. Her icy gaze swept across the table. For the first time, her pride, her unshakable dominance, had been wounded. She had always been the smartest person in any room. But now, an unknown man had almost destroyed a multi-million-dollar deal she thought was airtight. "Find out who he is," she said quietly, each word sharp as a blade. "Name, background, everything. I want to know why a janitor can read Japanese contracts and expose my meeting in front of my board." Her assistant nodded and slipped out without a word. Meanwhile, Gabe was walking down the hallway, heart still pounding. He didn't look back. He could feel the eyes burning into his back, but he knew he couldn't falter. He had promised himself to stay quiet, to just be a father, raise his daughter, and bury the past. But now he had broken his own rule. The elevator descended toward the lobby, glass walls reflecting his tired face. Dark hair streaked with gray, deep-set eyes, a hint of fatigue etched into every line. Yet beneath the worn uniform, his heart still beat to the rhythm of a fighter pilot, steady, precise, unflinching. That night he drove his old pickup truck back to the small apartment on the outskirts of town. The roads were empty, streetlights sparse. From the radio came the faint hum of a Texas country tune. Beside him sat a lunchbox. His dinner, now cold, meant to reheat for Maya. When he opened the door, Maya came running, holding her old fabric doll. "Daddy," she squealed, her bright dark eyes sparkling. Gabe knelt down, wrapped her in his arms. That single embrace erased everything, the tension, the secrets, the pain. He cooked a simple dinner, fried eggs, stir-fried vegetables, and rice. Maya chatted nonstop at the table. "Daddy, we had an art project today." "I drew an airplane, an F-22 like the one you told me about." Everyone in class stared. Gabe froze mid-motion, the fork suspended in his hand. "You drew an F-22? "Uh-huh," Maya grinned proudly. "And I wrote Midnight Viper next to it." "You said that's the coolest name." Gabe's heart tightened. He hadn't realized she remembered. Those bedtime stories about roaring engines, streaking through clouds, comrades in the sky. He'd thought they were just to lull her to sleep, but she'd carried them inside her. He forced a smile, his voice soft. "Yeah, but remember, sweetheart, that's our secret, okay? Just between you and me." Maya nodded solemnly, like she'd been given a mission. Secret. That night, when she was fast asleep, Gabe sat alone on the porch, the Texas stars spread wide above him. He pulled an old envelope from his pocket, creased and yellowed. Inside was a folded paper. Resignation, Connor Walsh, Midnight Viper. His hand trembled slightly. 3 years he had buried that name, trying to live as someone ordinary. But after today, everything had changed. Across town, Charlotte sat in her penthouse, the city glittering below her. Her assistant entered, placing a file on the glass desk. "Here's the information you requested, ma'am." Charlotte opened it and froze. The first photo made her breath catch. It wasn't the face of a janitor. In the military photo, he wore a flight suit, insignia gleaming on his shoulder, eyes sharp and unyielding. Beneath the picture, Captain Gabriel Alvarez, call sign, Midnight Viper. Charlotte stared. She knew that name. Midnight Viper wasn't just a rumor, it was legend. News articles years ago had spoken of him, a fighter pilot who led an impossible rescue mission in Syria in 2018, saving 6 fellow pilots and dozens of civilians. Then suddenly, he disappeared. His record erased, his name scrubbed from the media. She read on. Resigned 2020, wife deceased, cancer. Single father, currently employed as night janitor at Beaumont Dynamics. Charlotte leaned back in her chair, mind reeling. She had never imagined her sarcastic remark could awaken a name once revered across the military. A legend, now scrubbing her floors. She pressed her lips together, eyes narrowing, torn between intrigue and unease. If he truly was Midnight Viper, then his presence in her company couldn't be coincidence. In the dim light, Charlotte whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Alvarez?" And miles away, under the same Texas sky, Gabe sat motionless, staring upward. He knew the truth. Secrets never stay buried forever. Once the name Midnight Viper was spoken aloud, every door he'd tried to lock would soon swing open. And somewhere, a storm was already forming. Night in Austin blazed with highway lights, streams of white and gold cutting hot paths across the city. In a cramped apartment on the outskirts, Gabriel Alvarez sat at an old wooden desk, a small lamp casting a long shadow up the cracked wall. Beside Maya's sketchbook lay a thick envelope he had just pulled from a locked drawer. He opened it for the first time in years. Inside was a hastily written note, the handwriting uneven. "Goodbye, Midnight Viper. Your daughter needs a father, not a hero." Gabe held the paper, his chest tightening. It was Rebecca's last letter, his wife's words before she died. That letter had pulled him out of the sky, forced him to abandon glory and come back to earth. But tonight, after the chaos in the boardroom, the letter only reminded him of one truth. He had never truly left Midnight Viper behind. Meanwhile, in the gleaming penthouse downtown, Charlotte Beaumont stood by the window, looking out over Austin's glittering sprawl. The file her assistant had delivered that afternoon lay open across her desk. Military photos, mission reports, decorations. Charlotte was not easily shaken, but this time every ounce of her pride trembled. Why would a man once hailed as a legend choose to mop her floors? And why had he appeared now, exposing a trap no one else in her empire had seen? She tightened her grip on her wineglass, decision flickering in her eyes. She would meet him face to face. Not to thank him, but to understand him. The next morning, Beaumont Dynamics buzzed as usual. Employees in bright suits and polished shoes strode through the marble lobby, clutching laptops as if the world depended on each step. Among them moved Gabe, pushing his mop cart, his familiar blue uniform making him nearly invisible once again. But today felt different. The air shifted when the elevator doors opened and Charlotte Beaumont stepped out. The CEO herself, descending to the lobby. Conversations faltered. Heels paused mid-stride. Her gaze swept the room like a blade until it stopped, on him. "Mr. Alvarez," she said, her voice clear and crisp. The lobby went still. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The janitor's name, spoken by the CEO, unthinkable. Gabe looked up, surprise flickering only briefly before his calm returned. "Need me to clean something, Ms. Beaumont?" Charlotte approached, her heels striking sharp rhythms on the marble. When she stopped before him, sunlight poured through the glass wall, setting her blue eyes against his dark brown ones. "We need to talk," she said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. On the 42nd floor. "Right now." Gasps scattered through the lobby. A janitor summoned upstairs by the CEO. "Impossible." Gabe said nothing. He studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded, set the mop back into the cart, and followed her into the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing them in silence. Inside, tension pressed thick between them. Charlotte stood straight, arms crossed. Gabe leaned lightly against the wall, gaze fixed on nothing. "Who are you, really?" she asked finally. "Don't tell me you're just a janitor." "I have your file. Midnight Viper, isn't it?" Gabe closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, calm and flat. "That man died 3 years ago." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me. No one could translate that contract like you did. No one looks like that, moves like that, except someone who's flown a fighter jet. And no one stays that calm under ridicule unless he's stared death in the face." The elevator chimed. Floor 42. Cold air rushed out as the doors opened. Charlotte walked ahead, her heels echoing off the marble. Gabe followed, his worn shoes making softer, steadier sounds. In the empty conference room, she turned to face him. "I don't care why you left the service," she said, eyes locked on his. "I just want to know why you're here, in my company, at this moment." Gabe looked past her, out through the glass wall to the city beyond. His voice was low even. "I chose this place because no one here knows me. Because I wanted to raise my daughter, pay tuition, buy medicine when she's sick. I'm not here to cause trouble." Charlotte stepped closer, voice sharp. "But you already saved me from a $37 million disaster. Do you really think I'll let you keep mopping floors after that?" Silence. Only the soft hiss of the air conditioning filled the space. Gabe turned back to her, his dark eyes steady, pinning hers. For the first time, she felt as though she were the one being interrogated, stripped bare beneath that gaze that seemed to read everything, even the armor she wore as power. He spoke quietly, each word deliberate. "You have power, money, an empire. But there's one thing you don't understand. Sometimes people disappear to protect something greater than themselves. I don't need anyone digging up my past." Charlotte paused, then, as if to mask emotion, gave a small laugh, half mocking, half intrigued. "You really think you can stay invisible forever? Trust me, Alvarez, big secrets never stay buried. You saved my company once. That means you've stepped back into the game. And this game doesn't let people walk away." Gabe didn't answer. In his mind flashed Maya's smile, her bright eyes. He inhaled deeply. "If this game touches my daughter, I'll fight. But I don't fight for anyone else anymore. Only for her." Charlotte looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Her sharp gaze softened just a fraction. "I'll remember that." Outside, Austin roared with traffic. But inside that glass tower, an unspoken pact was forged between a millionaire CEO and a single-father legend. A fragile alliance, yet heavy with consequence. The masks had fallen, and the real storm had only just begun. The Texas night was heavy and hot, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and highway dust past the row of old apartments where Gabe and Maya lived. Inside the small living room, a dim yellow bulb spread a warm glow, enough for the 8-year-old girl to hunch over the table, focused on her drawing. Maya's colored pencils danced across the paper, sketching a night sky where a silver-gray fighter jet cut through the stars, its wings sharp as blades. Below it she wrote in careful letters, F-22 Viper. Gabe sat nearby on a wooden chair, eyes drifting toward the dark porch. An opened can of beer rested in his hand, but he didn't drink. Since that morning's conversation with Charlotte, a weight had settled in his chest. He knew the silence that had shielded him for years was gone. The mask had fallen. Once the millionaire CEO held the file of Midnight Viper, it was only a matter of time before others came looking. The phone on the table buzzed. Gabe flinched. The old device rarely rang. He used it only for work or for calls from Maya's school. He picked it up. "Alvarez?" The voice was low, gravelly, tainted with memory. He froze, a soldier's voice. There was no mistaking it. "You really thought you could disappear forever," the caller said. "Midnight Viper doesn't die. Word spreads faster than you think. They're hunting you. And this time, they're not coming to shake hands." Ice flooded his veins. He gripped the phone tighter, glancing at Maya, still coloring, innocent, humming softly. He forced his tone steady. "I'm not that man anymore. I'm just a father." A short, dry laugh crackled through the speaker. "You can believe that if you want. But the world doesn't forget, especially your old enemies." The line went dead. A monotone beep echoed in the small room. Gabe lowered the phone, his hand trembling slightly. Inside his chest pocket, the paper crane brushed against his skin, a fragile reminder whispering, "You can't let the past take her away." The next morning, tension hung thick over Beaumont Dynamics. Rumors had leaked across financial circles that the Nakamura deal was suspended due to unfavorable clauses. Reporters were circling, questions flying, but no one dared speak. Charlotte stayed silent publicly, but in her mind a new plan was forming. She called Gabe up to her office again. His worn shoes clicked softly against the polished floor as he entered. Charlotte stood by the window, Austin's skyline blazing behind her. "Someone called me," she said without turning around. A former officer didn't give his name. He warned me that the name Midnight Viper just appeared in a classified report. "Do you know what that means?" Gabe said nothing. Charlotte turned to him, eyes sharp as glass. "It means you're not just my secret anymore. You're on the radar, and when they find you, it won't just be you in danger. That child of yours will be too." At that, Gabe's face twitched. He stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Don't ever bring my daughter into this." Charlotte didn't flinch. If anything, she looked calmer, cool, almost pitying. "I'm not the one who did." "You did, the moment you walked into that meeting and revealed who you were." Silence thickened, broken only by the low hum of the AC. Finally, Charlotte's tone softened, deliberate but firm. "Listen to me, Alvarez. You have two choices. 1. Keep pretending you're a janitor. Wait until the day they come to your door and watch everything you love fall apart. Or 2. Work with me. I have power and resources. You have skill and instinct. Together, we can control this game before it controls us." Gabe stared at her, measuring every word. Behind her sharp gaze, he saw not just pride, but the fierce, calculating glint of someone who had survived by using power as armor. He looked away, toward the horizon beyond the glass. His voice was quiet, resigned, but edged with steel. "I swore I'd never play this game again. But if the shadows of my past are coming for me, then maybe I don't have a choice." Charlotte's lips curved, part triumph, part caution. "Good. Then from now on, Midnight Viper isn't just a name in a file. You're my partner." Out in the suburbs, Maya skipped home from school, clutching a drawing marked with a bright red A. But down the street, a black sedan sat idling, its headlights off. Inside were two men in dark suits watching. One flipped open a folder. Inside was a photo. Gabe, in a flight suit, call sign on his shoulder, Midnight Viper. "That's him," the man muttered. Confirmed, the engine hummed to life. The car slipped quietly into traffic and disappeared. In the dark, the hunt had begun, and Gabe understood now. The past never dies. It only waits for the right moment to return, like a shadow rising to swallow the fragile light of the present. This time he wouldn't be fighting for the sky. He would be fighting for his daughter. Friday night. Austin shimmered like an artificial galaxy, skyscrapers reflecting against the Colorado River, their lights rippling across the dark surface. Inside the 48th floor office of Beaumont Dynamics, Charlotte Callahan sat behind a vast desk, her tense gaze fixed on the glow of her computer screen. She was reviewing every line of Gabe Alvarez's history, from his Air Force service record to the moment he vanished from all databases. The classified documents, stamped top secret, painted the story of a pilot who had shattered every training record, led impossible missions, and left even the Pentagon speaking his name with reverence. The elevator chimed. Charlotte looked up. Gabe entered, still wearing the faded janitor uniform, yet carrying a presence that no fabric could hide. The hallway light stretched his shadow long across the floor. "You're late?" Charlotte said. Her voice even but edged with urgency. "I had to put Maya to bed first," he replied, closing the door behind him. "She needs a sense of normal, especially when the world outside is about to collapse." Charlotte sighed. She didn't need to ask further. She knew every word was true. Gabe was fighting two wars, the one outside and the one called fatherhood. He walked forward and placed a thick envelope on her desk. "This is everything I've kept," flight logs, schematics, training data. If someone's manipulating things from the inside, these are what they're after. We move first, or we'll be dead before we see them coming. Charlotte's eyes darted to the envelope, then back to him, her expression grave. When do you think they'll strike? Gabe's voice was iron. They won't wait long. And when they do, they won't go for me first. They'll go for my weakest point. Maya. The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Charlotte's hand tightened on the chair arm, her knuckles pale. Since when did an 8-year-old child become the center of such a storm? And Gabe was right. That night, as the city thinned and streetlights flickered, a black SUV stopped in front of the worn-down apartment block where Gabe lived. 2 men stepped out, dark suits, faces cold, movement silent. One popped open the trunk and retrieved a small silver case. Under the streetlight, the metal glinted, revealing equipment far beyond civilian grade. Orders are clear, one muttered. Make it look like an accident. No loose ends. The kid's the bait. They moved toward the building, soundless as ghosts. On the 3rd floor, Gabe sat by the window, eyes scanning the street below. His instincts, the ones that had saved him countless times midair, screamed a warning. 2 figures moved differently. Too coordinated. Too quiet. His breath caught. He turned toward Maya's room. She was fast asleep, clutching her frayed teddy bear. Gabe knelt, whispering, "Sleep tight, little one." Then he scooped her gently into his arms, wrapping her in a thin blanket. The crash came seconds later, glass exploding in the living room. Gabe sprang into motion. His movements were pure reflex. A swift kick to the bathroom door, opening the back escape. Maya stirred, half awake. "Daddy, what's happening?" "It's just a game of hide and seek," he whispered. "Hold on tight to Daddy." They slid down the fire escape just as heavy footsteps thundered behind them. One of the men appeared at the window, raising a gleaming device, not a gun, but an electronic disruptor. A flash of blue light burst. Streetlights flickered out. The entire block plunged into darkness. Gabe ran through the alley, Maya clinging to him, her tiny heart racing. "Daddy, I'm scared." "Don't be. I've got you." He grabbed a broken brick and hurled it at a corner security camera. Sparks flew, and the alley went pitch black. Reaching his old pickup, Gabe flung open the door and set Maya on the back seat. As he closed it, the 2 men emerged from the shadows, faces fully visible under the moonlight. Cold, professional, merciless, midnight viper, one sneered. "You can't hide forever." Gabe didn't respond. He turned the key. The engine roared to life, tires screeching as the truck shot into the night, leaving the men behind. But in their eyes, there was no defeat, only the patience of hunters. Hours later, the truck rolled into an underground garage beneath Beaumont Dynamics. Charlotte was waiting, hair tied back, dressed in a black trench coat. When Gabe stepped out, drenched in sweat and carrying Maya, half asleep, trembling, she froze. For the first time, the icy CEO faltered. "What happened?" she demanded. "They found us," Gabe rasped, fury burning in his eyes. "There's no time left. Tell me everything you know. Who's behind this? Who has the power to turn military training data into a weapon?" Charlotte met his gaze, then nodded once. "Come with me. From now on, you and the girl stay here. Beaumont's lower vault is safer than any apartment in this city." Gabe hesitated, then nodded. He laid Maya down on the sofa in Charlotte's office and covered her with his jacket. The little girl, exhausted, gripped her father's finger even in sleep. Charlotte watched them silently. For years she had ruled through numbers and strategy, but this, watching a man stripped to his essence, protecting his child, shook something deep within her. She turned away, her voice low but firm. "Alvarez, from this moment, we're in the same war. But remember, this isn't just military. It's economics, politics, lives. Your family's fate is tied to mine now." Gabe clenched his fists, eyes glinting like steel. "Then I'll make sure no one wins, except us." Far from the city, in a secluded mansion, 2 men in suits entered a darkened room. Waiting inside was a man in a tailored Italian suit, his sharp eyes gleaming, a golden ring shaped like an eagle flashing on his finger. "Report," he growled. "We failed to take the child, sir. But confirmation is solid. Midnight Viper is alive, and he's working with Charlotte Callahan." The man smirked. "Charlotte. Always trying to play on a board too big for her. Fine. Then she'll learn what that costs." He opened a red envelope and pulled out a list. Beaumont Dynamics top investors. Running his finger slowly down the names, his eyes gleamed with cold malice. Begin the offensive. This time, we're not just coming for Alvarez. We're coming for the Callahan Empire. The Austin night stretched long and thick, the kind that whispered of storms yet to come. And somewhere in that darkness, the midnight viper, the single father sitting in seat 12F of his old truck, knew one truth. He had no choice but to fight again. Not in the skies this time, but in the glass towers of the city, among leather chairs, spotless contracts, and hands dipped in blood beneath perfect suits. Crystal Hall, Austin. Rows of crystal chandeliers hung high above, their white light spilling down over more than 800 guests, figures from finance, media, the military, and politics. On stage, a massive backdrop read, Beaumont Dynamics Global Defense Summit, the future of aerospace security. Charlotte Callahan stepped forward in a minimalist navy dress, her composure a blend of icy poise and power. The hall quieted instantly. She held the microphone, her voice resonating through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand at a critical crossroads. Technology can safeguard humanity, but in the wrong hands it can destroy it. At the far end of the hall, seated in the shadows, Gabe Alvarez watched from the very last row. The simple suit Charlotte had prepared for him made him look like just another mid-level staffer, but his calloused hands gripped the chair tightly. His eyes swept the room like a radar scan. Beside him, Maya sat with her hair neatly tied, eyes sparkling in awe at the grand event before her. "Daddy, it's like a movie," she whispered. Eyes wide, Gabe smiled faintly, but his heart was restless. His instincts, the ones honed in countless missions, told him something was wrong. This place wasn't safe. Charlotte continued her speech. But just as she mentioned the new program to prevent training system interference, the giant LED screen behind her flickered. A string of red codes appeared, followed by chilling text. "System compromised. Courtesy of Sovereign Shadow." Gasps erupted across the audience. Murmurs spread. The chandeliers flickered. The sound system screeched with static. Charlotte steadied herself, voice raised but calm. "Please, everyone, remain seated. This is just a technical—" Before she could finish, the screen flashed back on, playing a video. A young pilot inside a flight simulator screamed as his jet spun out of control. The aircraft tilted sharply, nose diving toward the ground. Then the crash. The sound of metal tearing and fire roaring filled the speakers. Someone shouted on the video, "We lost him!" The hall fell silent. Then came a distorted voice through the speakers, cold and taunting. "Midnight Viper, we know you're here. How many more pilots will die before you come out?" Gabe shot to his feet. His heart seized. He recognized that voice instantly. Sovereign Shadow, the man who once shared his flight unit. Now a traitor. Spotlights suddenly swung toward the audience, straight onto Gabe and Maya. Maya froze, terrified, clutching her father's arm. All eyes turned toward them. Charlotte understood immediately. This wasn't just a cyber attack. It was a public hunt, a spectacle meant to expose Gabe. Security guards rushed in, but before they could reach the row, two men in black suits entered from the rear doors. One drew a signal-jamming gun and aimed directly at Maya. A scream tore through the hall. Gabe's instincts kicked in. He moved faster than thought, spinning, shielding Maya, then bolting toward the left corridor. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed and shoved, chairs toppled, heels clattered, and camera flashes burst in the confusion. On stage, Charlotte dropped the microphone, running into the wings. She snatched her phone, calling military security on a private line. Inside, she cursed under her breath. Gabe had been right all along. Down the narrow corridor, Gabe held Maya close, pressing her against a pillar. His breathing was sharp. His heart pounded. "Daddy, what do they want?" Maya whimpered, trembling. "Listen to me, sweetheart," Gabe whispered. "They want me, not you. And I'll never let them touch you." His eyes turned to steel. The same eyes that had glowed through storm clouds and tracer fire now burned again, fierce and alive in a hallway filled with shadows. In the control room above the hall, Charlotte stormed in, shouting, "Lock all main doors! Deploy the tactical unit now!" But a technician turned, pale and sweating. "We can't, ma'am. The system's been hijacked." "All digital locks are unresponsive." Charlotte bit down hard on her lip. This was no longer a business war, this was cyber warfare. and Gabe was at its epicenter. Back in the corridor, a hitman crept closer, silent as smoke. Gabe sensed him before seeing him. He pivoted and kicked, hard, sending the gun clattering across the floor. Grabbing Maya, he sprinted toward the emergency stairwell. Every echo of footsteps behind them felt like a ghost from his past coming to reclaim him. No man left behind. His old commander's voice echoed in memory. No innocent left unprotected. Now his only comrade was his daughter. Gabe flung open the stairwell door. Cold night air rushed in. The wail of sirens drifted faintly from outside. He knew they had minutes, maybe less, before everyone, friend and foe alike, closed in. He crouched, meeting Maya's wide eyes. "Hold on tight, little one," he whispered. The real game starts now. Night had fully swallowed Austin. Only the flashing red-blue lights of police cars and the distant neon of advertisements broke through the darkness. Crystal Hall, where the summit had just turned into a war zone, now stood like a dying glass giant, its shattered reflections pulsing with the strobe of fire engines and military vehicles encircling it. Inside the building, Gabe Alvarez carried Maya tightly in his arms, descending the concrete stairs of the emergency exit. His heartbeat thundered, not from fear, but from instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive through storms, crashes, and ambushes. Above them echoed chaos. Screams, breaking glass, alarms blaring into madness. It was the soundtrack of a nightmare. "Daddy, are they still chasing us?" Maya whispered, trembling against his shoulder. "Yes," Gabe said softly, his tone steady but firm. "But don't worry. I won't let them touch you." He pushed open the steel door leading to the parking level. The scent of burnt circuitry and smoke hit his nose. Fluorescent lights flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the cold concrete floor. It was too quiet, and that meant only one thing: a trap. A figure appeared at the far end of the lot, Charlotte Callahan. Her black hair tied back, her elegant gown torn and smudged with dust, yet her eyes still blazed like a living weapon. In her hand gleamed a sleek handgun, one of those elite security models only the rich and powerful could acquire. "Alvarez," she called, voice urgent but controlled. "This way. I have a car waiting." Gabe moved toward her quickly but kept scanning every shadow. "Are you sure this route's clear?" Charlotte's voice was tight. "Nothing certain. But if you want to survive, we take this risk." The words had barely left her lips when the darkness stirred. From the far corner, 3 men in black suits stepped into the light, guns with silencers in hand. One smirked. "Charlotte Callahan, didn't think you'd come down here yourself." And Midnight Viper, finally out of hiding. What a memorable evening. Gabe shoved Maya gently behind Charlotte, his eyes narrowing like a drawn blade. "What do you want?" The lead man tilted his head, smiling. "You, Alvarez, and everything in that brilliant brain of yours, your combat algorithms, your command strategies. Sovereign Shadow wants you erased, but not before he drains your knowledge dry." Charlotte barked a dry laugh. "You think you can threaten us here? In downtown Austin, with police swarming outside?" The man shrugged casually. "We don't need the police to leave. They're busy hurting your guests upstairs. We just need 5 minutes. That's all it takes." Before the sentence ended, he raised his gun. But Gabe moved faster. He kicked a metal support column. Bang! The overhead light burst, sparks scattering like fireflies. Darkness consumed the garage in that instant. Midnight Viper awoke. Gabe lunged sideways, grabbed the gunman's wrist. Twisted, pivoted, movements smooth, brutal, precise, like executing flight maneuvers at Mach speed. A sharp crack echoed. The man's wrist snapped. He screamed in pain. Charlotte didn't waste a second. She raised her weapon and fired, 2 quick shots. The second attacker fell before he could react. The blaring fire alarm masked the gunfire. Gabe snatched the fallen pistol, pinned the last man against the wall, and hissed through his teeth. "Where is Sovereign Shadow?" The man grinned, blood dripping from his mouth. "He's everywhere. In your systems. In your data. And he won't stop until you're erased." Gabe slammed the gun butt into his temple. The man went limp. Maya clung to Charlotte, wide-eyed and trembling. Charlotte crouched beside her, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Your dad knows exactly what he's doing." Gabe turned, breathing hard, voice low and rough. "We need to move. Now." They sprinted toward Charlotte's armored SUV waiting at the exit ramp. The driver, a former special ops soldier with sharp eyes, threw the rear door open. Gabe slipped Maya inside, holding her close. Charlotte jumped into the front seat. The SUV roared to life and tore out of the underground garage, merging into the endless night of Austin. Just as they caught their breath, Charlotte's phone rang. A video call request blinked on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted face filled the display, sharp features, hollow eyes, shadows cutting across his face. Sovereign Shadow, Charlotte Callahan, Midnight Viper. His voice oozed amusement. Touching, really, seeing the two of you share a car. But remember this, every move you make is under my eyes. Tonight was only the rehearsal. The real game begins now. He raised an object toward the camera. Charlotte froze. It was a photograph, Maya asleep in bed. Taken before Gabe had fled the apartment the night before. Gabe's blood turned to ice. That meant the enemy had been inside his home. Standing right beside his sleeping daughter, he roared, slamming his fist into the dashboard so hard the frame shook. Maya startled awake, crying softly, clutching his arm. Charlotte's hands trembled on the wheel. For the first time in years, she felt fear claw at her chest. Gabe pulled Maya close, his voice hoarse but burning with resolve. Listen to me, Shadow. You can come for me, but if you ever touch her, I'll make sure there's not a single corner on this planet left for you to hide. On the screen, Shadow only smiled, then ended the call. Inside the SUV, only the sound of ragged breathing remained, the heavy rhythm of hearts racing against the storm closing in. They both knew. Tonight's escape was only the opening act. What lay ahead would not be a mere pursuit. It would be war, a total war where family, honor, and entire empires would be pulled into the fire. The SUV sliced through the night, tires grinding against the cold asphalt as if trying to crush the silence that filled the car. Austin after midnight was nothing but faint yellow streetlights scattered across empty blocks. Each lamplight flashed across Gabe Alvarez's face, revealing the tension etched deep in his eyes, the silent fury he could no longer hide. Maya had fallen asleep in his arms, her breath trembling. Her tiny hands clutched the fabric of his shirt, as if letting go might cause the world itself to collapse. Gabe kissed the top of her head, her hair carrying that faint, innocent scent of childhood sweat and crayons. Then he looked up again, eyes locked on the darkness ahead. For the first time in years, he felt himself standing at the edge of the abyss. His enemy had not only challenged him, they had touched the one piece of his soul that was sacred. In the front seat, Charlotte gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes fixed on the road though her thoughts spun in chaos. The phone screen had gone black, but the image of Sovereign Shadow holding up the photo of Maya refused to leave her mind. An invisible force had entered their lives, a shadow capable of standing right beside a sleeping child without leaving a trace. You know, Charlotte said hoarsely, her voice low. I thought I'd seen every kind of monster in the business world. The ones who devour companies just to polish a quarterly report, the CEOs who lay off 1,000 people to keep their stock price high. But what happened tonight, this goes beyond any nightmare I've ever imagined. Gabe didn't respond immediately. He looked down at his daughter's sleeping face, at the scars on his palms earned through years of labor and survival. Then finally he spoke, his voice deep, sharp as a blade drawn in the dark. Charlotte, every war has rules. In the sky, on the ground, even enemies honor that unwritten code. Soldiers respect soldiers. But Shadow, he has no code. To him, everything is just a pawn, even a child. Charlotte nodded slowly. In that moment, she saw him differently. No longer just the weary janitor in a faded blue uniform, but Midnight Viper, the man who once made elite pilots stand at attention the moment his call sign echoed through the radio. A man who lived by discipline, by loyalty, and by love for his family. The SUV turned off the main highway, gliding into a quiet suburb. Ahead loomed Charlotte's estate, a fortress of glass and steel, armed with the latest defense systems. The metal gates opened automatically, rows of cameras scanning their license plate before unlocking. The car rolled across the white stone driveway, lights flickering on as if greeting its mistress. Gabe carried Maya inside into a guest room designed for a child. Stuffed animals lined the shelves. Lavender-scented sheets weighted neatly on the bed. He laid Maya down gently, pulled the blanket over her, and watched as she stirred, whispering in her sleep. Daddy? When the door closed behind them, the air between Gabe and Charlotte turned heavy again. Downstairs, in the living room of marble and walnut, the tension was thick enough to hear the ticking of the wall clock. Charlotte poured 2 glasses of wine, her hand trembling slightly. "We need a pact," she said. "Something binding. Between us." Gabe raised an eyebrow. "A pact?" "Yes," Charlotte continued, meeting his eyes. "Sovereign Shadow isn't someone either of us can fight alone. If you keep trying to do this on your own, you'll die. If I rely only on power and money, I'll be crushed. But together, maybe, just maybe, we have a chance." Gabe was silent for a long moment. His finger tapped lightly against the wooden table, once, twice, 3 times. He had always fought alone, endured alone, survived alone. But now the enemy had found the one weakness he could not protect by himself. Maya. He finally lifted his gaze, his eyes dark and calm. "What kind of pact are you talking about?" Charlotte took a sip of wine, then leaned forward. Her voice dropped low, cold as steel. "Blood for blood. You protect me. I protect your daughter. You bring skill, strategy, instinct. I bring resources, intelligence, power. From this moment on, there's no Alvarez alone, no Callahan alone. Just one alliance against Shadow." The air in the room thickened until it was almost solid. Gabe studied her face for a long time, as if reading every pulse beneath her skin. Then he stood, reached into his boot, and drew out a small combat knife, the same blade that had followed him through countless missions. Without a word, he cut a shallow line across his left palm. Blood welled up instantly. He pressed his hand flat against the table. Charlotte didn't flinch. She slipped off her ring, took the knife, and sliced her own palm. When their hands clasped together, their blood mixed, warm, bright, binding. Their eyes met, a look equal parts defiance and trust. "No contracts, no signatures, just blood." Gabe spoke first, voice low and steady. "From now on, if I fall, you protect Maya. If you fall, I'll carry the Callahan group through the storm. This is our blood pact." Charlotte's breath shook slightly, but her tone was resolute. "And if either of us betrays the other, this blood will haunt us to the end." In that moment, between a billionaire CEO and a single father who had once been a legend, something unbreakable was forged. An alliance not written on paper, but in the very pulse of their veins. Outside, the night deepened. Across Austin's skyline, neon lights flickered like silent beacons. Somewhere out there, Sovereign Shadow watched, aware that his opponents were no longer 2 isolated figures, but one united force born from family and loyalty. Charlotte leaned back, exhaling, her mask of arrogance slipping for the first time. And for the first time, Gabe saw her not as the cold queen of the corporate world, but as a fighter, fierce, fragile, and human. "Tomorrow," she said softly, eyes half closed, "we begin. I'll open the data vaults and give you full access to every classified file under Callahan Group, and you teach me to see the world as you do, through instinct, not just numbers." Gabe nodded, his gaze softening. "And I'll teach Maya never to be afraid again, because there's only one thing I want. For her to grow up in a world where justice isn't just a word." Outside, the wind rustled through the maple trees, whispering like voices from the dark. But within that lit room, a pact had been sealed, one made of blood, faith, and the unbreakable will to protect what mattered most. The real war, from that moment, had only just begun. The first rain of the season poured down over Austin. Raindrops hammered against the glass roof of the Callahan estate, mingling with the howling wind like taut strings of a violin. In the temporary command room built beneath the mansion, dozens of monitors glowed in the dim light, each showing live data from satellites, covert trading networks, and encrypted military servers. Charlotte Callahan stood at the center, wearing a long dark coat, a cup of black coffee in hand. Her hair was tied back, shadows under her eyes betraying 3 sleepless nights, but her gaze still burned with the cold fire of a leader preparing for war. Across from her sat Gabe Alvarez, in front of the control console. His old uniform, once sworn never to be worn again, hung over the back of the chair, yet his presence radiated the precision of the soldier he once was. Every word from his mouth carried the calm authority of command. Target, Shadow Hub, the main server of Sovereign Shadow in the Northwood Industrial Zone. The signal confirms he's using it as a relay point. If we strike there, he'll have to reveal himself. Charlotte folded her arms, frowning. Are you certain? We're just 4 people, Alvarez. He's got an army of mercenaries and the best digital defense money can buy. Gabe's tone was steady, eyes locked on the glowing map. He's used to controlling everything from a distance. He won't expect us to come in person. That's the weakness of a man who thinks he's a god. On the holographic display, red markers represented Gabe's infiltration team approaching from the west via an old drainage tunnel. Blue markers showed Charlotte's cyber team, ready to disable the first layer of defense remotely. Maya had been sent away earlier that afternoon to a ranch owned by one of Charlotte's old friends, a retired military police officer. Before leaving, she hugged her father tightly. You'll come back, right, Daddy? Gabe crouched down, smiling softly, his hand resting on her hair. I promise. But when I do, you have to tell me about your first horseback ride, okay? Tears welled in her eyes. Don't let anyone hurt you, Daddy. He kissed her forehead, then looked up at Charlotte, who stood silently nearby. She didn't speak, only nodded, her expression a quiet vow. I'll keep her safe. 45. Northwood Industrial Zone. Wind howled, rain lashed like whips. From afar, the abandoned factory looked dead, overgrown with vines and rusted steel. But inside, faint LED lights pulsed, a heartbeat in the dark. Gabe and his 2 former comrades, Torres and Hadi, crouched against the western wall. Black tactical suits, thermal masks, radios humming in their ears. Side door secured with a 6-digit lock. Hadi whispered. Charlotte, it's your move, Gabe murmured into his mic. At the mansion, Charlotte's fingers flew across her keyboard, eyes darting between codes streaming like rivers. Hold on. Wait, there. Code 472891. Door opens in 10 seconds. Move. Copy that. The steel door hissed open. Gabe slipped inside first, weapon drawn. The hallway beyond was dim, metallic, cold, the low hum of servers echoing like a mechanical pulse. Torres swept left. Hadi covered the rear. Too quiet. Then, click. An infrared tripwire. Damn it, Torres hissed. A crimson beam flashed across the corridor. Gabe shoved both men down, just as a laser defense grid sliced through the air where they'd stood, melting a line into the steel wall. They know we're here. Charlotte's voice crackled in his earpiece. Alvarez, abort! Get out of there! Negative, Gabe replied calmly. This is how we draw him out. Send a decoy data stream. Make him think we're downloading the flight logs. Charlotte understood immediately. Her fingers danced faster. A false data transmission began broadcasting from the Shadow Hub system. Seconds later, every monitor flickered. Then his face appeared. Sovereign shadow, distorted, shifting, like a ghost projected through static. I knew it, he sneered. Midnight Viper never dies quietly. Show yourself, Shadow, Gabe said, voice low. I didn't come to hide tonight. A rasping laugh filled the speakers. You still think this is your old kind of war? This isn't fought with bullets anymore, Alvarez. In this age, information kills faster than any weapon, and I've just sent a little video of your daughter to every government channel in the world. Charlotte's breath caught. No, he's lying, Gabe cut in sharply. He's trying to break our focus. Then prove it, Shadow whispered. The factory lights died. Total darkness. A voice floated through the void. It's over, Alvarez. When the emergency lights blinked back on, Shadow was standing there, flesh and blood, gaunt, pale, eyes sunken and burning with bitterness. We were in the same squad once, he said, slowly stepping forward. They praised you, gave you medals. While I was discarded, I just wanted the world to listen to me the way it listened to you. Gabe raised his weapon. And to get that, you used a child as bait? Shadow smiled faintly. The world doesn't need heroes anymore. It only listens to fear. Gabe didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. A single shot. The sound thundered through the storm. Shadow fell, blood blooming across the floor. But then, the servers around them flared red. A self-destruct sequence triggered. Charlotte! Gabe shouted into his mic. I see it, she cried. He set an auto-wipe. 60 seconds until total data release. We can't let it spread. Cut the auxiliary lines. Working on it. 30 seconds. Disable. Subport 5. 15 seconds. Alvarez, get out. I can't hold it. Gabe looked at the countdown flashing before him, at the dead man on the floor, at the storm raging outside, and at the image of Maya in his mind. Her laugh, her voice, her trust. He whispered, I'm not leaving. Not while he's still here. Then he leaned over the console, typing a final command. The lights flared, white, blinding, then went black. Silence. Charlotte froze in front of her monitors. Then, through the static of the radio, his voice came, steady, calm, alive. It's done. Charlotte collapsed into her chair, tears spilling silently, part relief, part exhaustion. Inside the factory, Gabe looked down at Sovereign Shadow's body. The man gasped one final line, his voice fading into the hum of dead. Servers, you think you've won? No one ever defeats the dark, Alvarez. The dark lives inside you. Then he went still. Gabe picked up the external drive lying beside him, the only device not destroyed. He slipped it into his jacket and stepped out into the rain. The next morning, Charlotte stood on the balcony as sunlight filtered through the trees. From the road below, an old pickup truck rumbled up the driveway. Gabe climbed out, drenched, exhausted, but alive. His eyes, though weary, carried a rare peace. The front door burst open. Maya ran across the yard, shouting, Daddy! He dropped to his knees, catching her in his arms. Her laughter mingled with the soft rustle of leaves and the scent of rain. Charlotte watched from the balcony, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time in years, she felt something other than control, hope. Gabe looked at his daughter, then up at the sky, whispering softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Sometimes to protect the light, you have to walk through the dark. And that night, the night when two people from opposite worlds fought side by side against an invisible empire, would be remembered as the legend of Midnight Viper and Charlotte Callahan, a story where blood, intellect, and love converged to prove that heroes still exist, even if they wear no medals, only the heart of a father. In the quiet dawn of Austin, Gabriel Alvarez sat on the front porch, watching Maya run and laugh among the wildflowers. There were no sirens, no flashing alarms, only the warmth of peace he had traded his entire past to obtain. Charlotte Callahan pulled up by the gate, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing a faint smile. They didn't need to speak. A single glance between them said everything. That the war was over, but compassion would remain. Their story came to a close. Yet its lesson still echoed. Never judge someone before you understand them. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes they're the ones who saved the world from the shadows. And if you must choose kindness. Because compassion can reignite light even in the darkest places. Midnight Viper needed no titles, no medals. He needed only one thing, to live with integrity and to teach his daughter that kindness, too, is a form of courage.